What if a building could call out to you? Not with a whisper, but with a siren song promising to end all your troubles. A song that only the lost, the broken, and the dangerously curious can hear. Follow me down the rabbit hole about the Cecil Hotel. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about the Cecil Hotel. Thank you, Emily and Lindsay, for your request. But before we get started, of course, I love to thank our sponsors. So thank you, Wise Wolf Gold, for sponsoring my podcast. Guys, if you want gold and silver delivered straight to your front door for as little as $50 a month, go to rabbithole.gold right now. It comes straight to your front door. Super easy, super convenient. Precious metals are really in right now. If you're curious about what's in, go buy some. The Cecil Hotel was built in 1924 by three hoteliers, William Banks Hanner, Charles L. Dix, and Robert H. Shops, at the cost of over $1 million. That's about $21 million today. It's located in downtown Los Angeles and officially opened its doors on December 20th, 1924. The hotel was initially built as a destination for business travelers and tourists. The building was designed by architect Loy Lester Smith, who also designed the historic City Club building, now known as the Primrose Design Building. The building is 14 stories tall with 700 rooms, and at the time of its opening, it claimed to be absolutely fireproof. The lavishly fashionable Travelers Hotel began its decline just 5 years after opening when the Great Depression hit the United States. It saw a spike again throughout the 1940s before a steady decline in the decades following, with the nearby area of Skid Row becoming increasingly dangerous and a place for transient people to hang out and live on the streets. In 1987, the band U2 featured the Cecil Hotel in their music video, Where the Streets Have No Names. In 2008, new owners took over and refurbished a portion of the hotel, and by 2011, the Cecil Hotel was rebranded Stay on Main Street, separating a residential portion from a hotel portion. Although the reception areas were separate during the day, the building shared facilities between tenants and guests, and the building's official website remained thececilhotel.com. In 2014, Richard Bourne, a hotelier from New York, bought the hotel for about $30 million, and Simon Barron Development, a New York-based firm, acquired a 99-year ground lease on the property. The Barons were committed to preserving the architecturally and historically significant components of the building, like the grand lobby, and then redeveloping the work that had been done in the recent years to make it all work better. In 2017, the hotel closed for renovations, but the work was suspended indefinitely when the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020. In December of 2021, the Cecil Hotel reopened as an affordable housing complex operated by the Skid Row Housing Trust. The facility promised to provide affordable living accommodations for 600 low-income residents. In 2025, Reverend Dylan Littlefield performed acts of service at the Cecil Hotel for the homeless population. Reverend Littlefield says, quote, "The Cecil is almost becoming a parish of its own." He actually has a Substack called The Chaplain's Life, where he documents the highs and lows of life at the Cecil Hotel. He describes himself as, quote, "LGBTQ clergy and an assertive advocate." The hotel has been for sale since 2024. The latest reports of the hotel as of 2025 state that there are still residents living in the hotel, but the Skid Row Housing Trust phone number is no longer in service. Their website has been shut down, and there is no phone number to confirm if the hotel is still working as a housing project for the unhoused or if it's like just people have moved into the hotel now and they just like live there. But also, Simon Barron Development from New York has a ground lease on the property for 99 years. So are they allowing people to live there? Are they doing anything with the hotel? It's kind of a mystery, like the whole hotel is. Like I mentioned a little bit, this hotel is on the infamous Skid Row in Los Angeles, California. It was known for heavy drug activity and prostitution. After the Great Depression, poverty struck the area. As many as 10,000 homeless people lived within a 4 mile radius of the hotel, and often with vacant buildings, people move in. This isn't like a California thing, this is just a everywhere thing. The hotel hosted one of the first public meeting places in Los Angeles for Alcoholics Anonymous in the 1940s. It has also been linked to serial killers, suicides, mysterious deaths, and murders. It has an infamous reputation. The hotel has been the subject of numerous books, podcasts, like this one, movies, and the TV series American Horror Story Hotel. There have been at least 19 confirmed deaths at the Cecil, 11 suicides, and 6 possibly accidental deaths, and 2 confirmed murders. Although the previous hotel manager, Amy Price, reported on the Netflix documentary that 911 was called from the hotel 3 or 4 times a day over her 10 years of management. That's a lot of 911 calls. Amy Price estimates that at least 80 deaths have occurred at the Cecil Hotel. There have been over 20 reported suicides in the hotel. However, the exact number is not known and is higher depending on like which source you look at. In the 1960s, the Cecil started to be known as the Suicide just because of how many suicides had occurred at that hotel. But let's take it all the way back to the first confirmed death and talk about the suicides for a second. Percy Orman Cook in 1927 left a note addressed to the press stating that he spent $40,000 in the last 6 months in a vain attempt to buy happiness, writing, quote, "Money cannot buy happiness. I have tried, and I find that it cannot be done. I have lost my wife, my son, and my home. I am doing the only thing left for me to do." Then he shot himself in his hotel room. Percy was said to have been a wealthy man in Hollywood. His son was a student at Harvard, and he and his wife were estranged, living apart at the time. But before living in Hollywood, he was this well to do real estate dealer in Providence, Rhode Island. His death occurred only 3 years after the hotel opened, and he was only 52 at the time. William Kelly Norton, 1931. WK went missing from his home in Manhattan Beach. He was later found in his hotel room at the Cecil by a maid, which unfortunately is kind of what happens a lot. I would hate to be a maid at the Cecil Hotel. This was just a few hours after his death, so the body was kind of fresh. The police found a number of capsules they believed to have contained poison in his vest pocket. His death was ruled a suicide. He checked into the hotel around a week earlier under the alias name James Willis of Chicago. Benjamin Dodich, 1932. Benjamin was found just a few hours after he had checked into the hotel of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his right temple. The maid discovered his body as well. Again, I think the maid discovered a lot of bodies. Whichever maid. They probably went through a lot of maids. Sergeant Louis D. Borden, 1934. Sergeant Borden was a former sergeant in the Army Medical Corps. He was found dead in his hotel with his throat slashed. A razor was found by his body, along with a note reporting that he ended his life due to ill health and asked for the little he had to leave to be given to Mrs. Edna Hassoner in Edmonds, Washington. He gave Edna's P.O. Box address. Grace E. Baldwin Magro, 1937. Grace was found crushed and entangled in telephone wires from a 9-story plunge from her hotel window. She was 25 years old and married to Willard S. Magro. However, she was accompanied at the hotel by a 26-year-old sailor from the USS Virginia who was sleeping at the time of her plunge and was unable to explain how or why she exited the window. The police were unable to determine whether it was an accident or suicide. I think that murder is also plausible, but he was sleeping. Roy O. Thompson, 1938. Roy Thompson was a Marine fireman from Port Arthur, Texas, who fell from a 14th story window of the Cecil. He suffered multiple fractures of the head, body, and limbs. The police determined his death was a suicide. There are a lot of people that jumped out of windows at this hotel. Like an odd number of window jumpers. Maybe, I don't know how many people jump out of windows of other hotels. Okay, so I went ahead and looked it up really quick because I was curious and I got the AI generated answer. So, jumping from hotel windows is not a common suicide method in the United States. Overall, it only accounts for less than 2% of all reported suicides in 2005. So, this is quite a while ago. However, the prevalence varies based on location. So in New York City, jumping from high rises is common because there's so many skyscrapers. Las Vegas is very popular for hotel window suicides, which is also why they installed like non-opening windows in Las Vegas. But overall, less common than other suicide methods. I do think it's interesting that at this hotel, which 14 stories is not like a super large hotel, maybe back in the 1920s it was, but you have a lot of people that are jumping from hotel windows. This next person, Dorothy Seeger, she did not jump from a window. She was a teacher. She checked into the hotel under the name Evelyn Brent, and she actually ingested poison. She had sent a suicide note to her relatives prior to committing suicide. That was in 1940. In 1944, Dorothy Jean Purcell gave birth in the Cecil Hotel bathroom while her boyfriend slept in the bed. They had not known that she was pregnant, and she stated that she got up, she didn't want to wake up her boyfriend, and she gave birth in the bathroom. And then she thought that her baby was dead. So she just did what any mother would do and threw him out the window? What? And then she just like went back to bed, never told her boyfriend about this at all. The baby was found on the roof of an adjacent building, and the autopsy actually revealed that the baby had air in his lungs, meaning he was born alive. And then he died from the injuries he suffered from being thrown from that window. Dorothy was charged with murder, but found not guilty of the murder of her son by reason of insanity. Robert Smith, 1947, died from falling from the seventh floor of his hotel room. Helen Gurney, 1954, she plunged out of the seventh floor hotel room and landed on the hotel's marquee sign. Hundreds of spectators gathered as her body was lowered from the sign, and then shortly after, the police were called to aid a man who was hysterical. The man was Melvin Hinckley, a 28-year-old ministry student who reported he was completely unnerved by witnessing the woman fall to her death, which I can only imagine. That would unnerve almost anybody, I would think. Julia Frances Moore in 1962 jumped from her eighth floor hotel room and landed on the second floor roof in the light well of the building. Police say she did not leave a note, and after searching her room, the police found a small overnight bag and a purse containing only 30 cents, a bank book with $1,800 in a Springfield bank, and a bus ticket stub showing she had arrived from St. Louis, and some papers with a St. Louis home address. This next one's kind of wild. So I heard it a couple different ways. So I'll tell you both ways that I heard it. This is the story of Pauline Auden and George Giannini. This happened in 1962. So Pauline is said to have leapt from her ninth story hotel room after arguing with her estranged husband in that hotel room, and then he left. She left this farewell note, but without mentioning why she took her own life. After she left in the building, she actually landed on a 65-year-old man named George Giannini. The police initially thought that maybe it was like a suicide pact between the two, but later it was determined that Giannini had had his hands in his pockets and his shoes were still on his feet at the time of impact. So they think that she landed on him. The other story I heard was that George was Pauline's husband, although they don't have the same last name, so I'm not tempted to believe that one as much. And that after they fought, he left the hotel room, she jumped and then landed on him by accident. Like either way, she jumped out the window, didn't mean to land on anybody, and then ended up landing on this guy. Was it her husband? Was it not? I'm leaning towards no, but I thought I'd share both stories with you. Goldie Osgood, 1964. She was a retired telephone operator who had been nicknamed Pigeon Goldie by residents in the area for always feeding the birds. She was found to have been raped, stabbed, and beaten to death in her room. And a suspect was arrested, but later cleared of the murder, and this murder still remains unsolved today. Allison Lowell in 1975 was an alias used by a Jane Doe who jumped from a 12th floor window onto the second floor roof. In her room, she left behind a black purse, a yellow metal key, and a Greyhound bus ticket purchased in Bakersfield, California. She was determined to be somewhere between 20 and 30 years old and found with scars on both wrists. John Doe number 707 UMCMA died in 1992. There was this body found of an African American male behind the Cecil after dropping from the top floor of the hotel. The police could not determine whether the man's death was a result of an accident, suicide, or murder, and they also never found out who this man was. Probably the most famous Cecil Hotel story is the one of Elisa Lam in 2013. She was a 21-year-old girl from Canada who went missing at the Cecil Hotel. So she made headline news due to the mysterious and unexplained way she died. So some speculate that she was murdered, possessed, or haunted by ghosts. At the same time, her sister claims that she had stopped taking her prescribed medication for bipolar disorder, which later we're going to get into the medications that were in her system when they did the autopsy. She had bipolar medication in her system. So I don't know if she necessarily stopped taking her prescribed medication. Maybe she wasn't taking all of it. Either way, there was video footage released of her in the hotel elevator, pressing buttons, stepping in, stepping out, and then like hiding in the corner. Finally, she is seen exiting the elevator, but then the elevator door didn't close until minutes after she exited it, as if someone was holding it open, which is like a very odd thing. Many people speculate that this could have been the elevator game, which is this urban legend in Korea. The game is said to transport a person to a different dimension. Scent trained dogs led the police to the fire escape, which in turn led them to the roof, but the police didn't find anything. They searched the entire roof, nothing was found. 3 weeks after she had gone missing, guests began to complain about the low pressure, taste, smell, and color of the water. It was then that the maintenance man discovered Elisa's fully naked body in the water tank on the roof of the building. The tank was allegedly fully closed when Elisa was found, something that should have been impossible had she climbed in the tank herself. And this has never been explained. Elisa's case has been turned into a Netflix documentary called Crime Scene: The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning. We're going to get into it a little bit more in the conspiracy section. There's a lot of conspiracies about her death. Jason Florio Lazar, 2015. 28-year-old Jason Lazar was found deceased outside the hotel on June 12, 2015. Jason was a husband and father who traveled from Oceanside, New York. It was suspected that Jason fell from the building in a possible suicide, though that has never been confirmed. The assistant manager of the hotel at the time told reporters that Jason was not a guest at the hotel and could have been an intruder. Jason sustained, quote, multiple traumatic injuries, according to the LA County Medical Examiner's report. The Black Dahlia. Many people have claimed that Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia, was a guest at the Cecil Hotel and was spotted at the bar right before she was found murdered. But there are other people that have been drawn to the Cecil Hotel outside of people that have been murdered or committed suicide. Serial killers have been drawn to this hotel, at least two. Richard Ramirez, nicknamed Night Stalker, was a Satan worshiper and a temporary resident at the Cecil Hotel during his murder spree. The Night Stalker was an American originally from El Paso, Texas. He was a Satanist, serial killer, rapist, and burglar who murdered at least 13 people in California between 1984 and 1985, all the while living at the Cecil Hotel. Richard Ramirez tortured his victims in gruesome ways. At his first court appearance, Richard raised a hand with a pentagram drawn on it and shouted, "Hail Satan." A pentagram was found drawn on the wall of one of the murder scenes, and survivors of his attacks testified that he ordered them to swear to Satan. After his conviction, Richard flashed a two-fingered devil sign at photographers and muttered evil. Richard's case lasted 4 years, making it one of the longest criminal cases in U.S. history. More than 1,600 prospective jurors were called due to the notoriety of the case. They had needed to find jurors that didn't know anything about it. A female juror was actually murdered during the deliberation stage. Like the jurors had been deliberating for 13 days when one day she just like didn't show up. That juror was found beaten and shot to death. The next day, the man accused of her murder committed suicide, leaving a note stating that he killed her in an argument. The defense attorneys attempted to argue that the fellow jurors were too distraught to continue after learning of the female juror's murder. They noted the similarities between the juror's murder and the attacks attributed to the Night Stalker. I mean, I can't imagine how terrified I would be. But the judge continued the trial, stating, quote, "We must get on with the task life has given us." The jurors continued deliberations with an alternate juror who later said the death of the juror did not influence their decision. He was convicted and sentenced to death, and he quoted in a reaction to the verdict, quote, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland," end quote. Which I feel like is such a nod to other conspiracies. We're not getting into it right now. Richard was sent to San Quentin prison on death row, and he had a flock of women who would visit him in prison and sent him love letters. And in fact, in 1996, he married Doreen Leoy in a visiting room at San Quentin prison. Ramirez still had pending court appeals when he was transported to a hospital in 2013, where he died of liver failure. Jack Unterweger stayed at the Cecil Hotel in 1991. He was born Joanne Unterweger in 1950 in Austria to a prostitute who abandoned him. He lived with his alcoholic grandfather for several years and was arrested at the age of 16 for assaulting a prostitute. When Jack was 26, he was convicted of murder. While in prison, Jack learned to read and write and would eventually write an autobiography in 1984, which became a bestseller. Jack's writing convinced authorities that he was reformed and ultimately led to his parole in 1990. Following his release, he became a literary celebrity and journalist, with his book even being made into a movie. While on assignment for 5 weeks as a journalist for an Austrian magazine, Jack stayed at the Cecil Hotel, where he reportedly raped and strangled 3 sex workers: Shannon Exley, Irene Rodriguez, and Peggy Booth. Some people have claimed that Jack chose the Cecil Hotel because of its ties to the Night Stalker. It is reported that Jack chose the victims while participating as a guest of the LAPD on ride-alongs patrolling the red light district, which at first I was like, don't they do background checks on this guy? And then I was like, no, they think that he's reformed. So of course they're going to be like, oh, he's like totally fine to go on these ride-alongs when he was not. Despite his public image as a reformed man, police suspected Unterweger of committing a new string of murders and put him under surveillance. After a few months, he was arrested again in 1992. He continued to claim that he was innocent, but overwhelming evidence led to his conviction of 9 murders in 1994. He hanged himself in his prison cell the same year. The question that keeps being brought up is, what is causing all this to happen at the Cecil Hotel? What about it is causing the deaths? Because this place just reeks of death. It's literally the hotel with the most deaths in the United States. So, what causes this? A lot of people believe that it's paranormal or demonic possession. A former management employee of the Cecil stated in an interview for an Unusual Places article, quote, "Within the first 6 months, I and other fellow employees had received hundreds of complaints about disembodied voices, crying, screaming, and disturbing whispering in various rooms. Seeing the silhouette of unidentified people running through rooms and disappearing into walls, doors and cabinets opening and closing, sink and shower faucets going on and off, sickening smells that moved and inexplicably disappeared, and the physical sensation of being electrically shocked, pinched, or even pushed by no one, and the list goes on," end quote. The Cecil was featured on an episode of Ghost Adventures in 2021, claiming the hotel had been haunted for decades. The Cecil opened the building for the Ghost Adventures crew, telling them it was the first and last time they would ever allow a paranormal investigation to take place. The lead paranormal investigator, Zach Baggins, quoted, "When we are walking through those floors and nobody is there, even with lights on, you can feel those spirits move through you, around you. They're watching you. There was just something about this building," end quote. It is believed that evil lives there and corrupts the minds of the guests to do evil deeds. Maybe that's why Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger were drawn to it because they already had evil in them, so they went to a place with evil. Or maybe the hotel chose them and convinced them to do the evil deeds. Especially if Jack was a reformed man, and then he did all these evil deeds after going to the Cecil Hotel. And with all these people committing suicide and randomly just jumping out windows, it feels very unprepared, like last minute decisions to commit suicide. Not that that doesn't happen, it happens all the time, but it just feels very odd. I had this thought that maybe the hotel was actually built on a portal to hell. But let's get a little bit more into Elisa Lam's death because some think it's a murder, some think it's a cover up, there are so many conspiracies behind it. The autopsy of Lisa Lam showed no signs of physical or sexual assault. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning and noted that her bipolar disorder would be a contributing factor. The elevator footage released of Lisa's final and only hotel appearance has a clear time gap and distortion, leaving people to speculate why the footage would have been altered. Other people who were staying in the same room as Lise expressed their concerns to hotel management about her erratic behavior. The police and search dogs had checked the roof before Elisa was found in the water tank and found no trace of her. The water tank lid was supposedly closed when Elisa was found inside, and the lid could not have been closed from the inside. So somebody on the outside had to have closed the lid, which makes the ruling of her death accidental not really plausible. Or like maybe she fell in and somebody came behind and closed it and just didn't notice her in there. It's just very odd. The hotel staff says the 20-pound lid was difficult to move and required lifting from the top of the tank. The tank stood on a platform, and accessing the tank lid required climbing a steep, narrow ladder. And then once you're on top of the tank, she would have had to stand on the opposite side to lift the lid straight up and then climb over the lid to get into the tank. And then she would have had to also remove her clothes. Basically, it wouldn't have been possible for her to close the lid behind her. And also, on that note, her clothes were not on the roof. Otherwise, the police would have found them when they searched, or the maintenance man, when he went to look in the water tank, would have seen her clothes on the ground. Her clothes were nowhere to be found. And she wasn't wearing them. She was naked when she was found. The autopsy report does not show any physical or sexual assault and no noticeable markings on her body. However, there was 0.02% alcohol in her bile, and her liver did contain her SRNI medication, which treated her depression, and also the medication that was used to treat her bipolar and epilepsy disorders, which I don't know if it was enough medication, but she definitely was taking her medication. So those that are like, well, she went off her medication, she has bipolar disorder, that's why she killed herself. I don't know, she still had medication in her body. It was reported that Elisa's body had significant decay. Therefore, there is not sufficient evidence to conclude that her toxicology played a role in her death. But it begs the question, was this a Blackwater copycat? Blackwater is a 2005 horror and mystery movie that shares unsettling parallels with the Elisa Lam case, primarily because in both, the body was discovered in a rooftop water tank. Furthermore, both the film's plot and the real life tragedy involved a woman, an apartment building, experiencing strange water problems and a sinister black water element affecting the plumbing. The movie centers around supernatural occurrences, including being haunted by a ghost. And the primary target of the ghost was Delilah's 6-year-old daughter, Cecilia, who was the main character. So, did somebody copy this movie with Elisa's murder? They just wanted to do it at the Cecil Hotel because of the Cecilia aspect of it? I don't know. It's really weird. In early February 2013, the same month of Elisa Lam's death, Skid Row, where Elisa Lam died, had this major outbreak of tuberculosis. The outbreak was pinpointed to Skid Row and ultimately exposed 4,560 identified people to TB, which warranted the CDC to get involved and perform genotyping on the population. Genotyping can be used for a wide range of applications, such as genealogy, assessing risks and causes for common diseases and health conditions, animal and human research, and forensic investigation, as published by a National Center for Biotechnology Information Study. 662 cases of TB were reported in 2013 in Los Angeles County, and the TB rate was highest among the foreign-born population, affecting the Asian population the most. Well, Lisa Lam was both foreign-born and Asian. Coincidentally, the name of the test used to diagnose TB was the Lam ELISA. Lam ELISA stands for lipoarabinomannan enzyme linked immunosorbent array. So that just seems very coincidental. And we don't believe in coincidences around here. And lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the elevator game, which is a popular urban legend originating from South Korea that involves a specific ritual to travel to an alternate dimension. Now, Elisa wasn't from South Korea. Her parents were originally from China, and then she lived in Canada at the time, but she might have known of this game. So the game requires a person to be alone in an elevator in a building with at least 10 floors and to press a specific sequence of floor buttons: 4, 2, 6, 2, 10, and 5, which could account for why she was pressing the buttons in weird ways. It is said that on the fifth floor, a young woman may enter the elevator, but the rules advise against speaking to her. If the ritual is successful, the elevator will ascend to the 10th floor, where the player will find themselves in a deserted, dark world with a faint red glow. To return to the real world, the person must repeat the button sequence in reverse and exit only when the surroundings appear normal on the first floor. The legend warns of various risks, such as being followed by malevolent spirits or being unable to return. Still, most people conclude that it is simply a frightening urban legend with no scientific basis. But if this hotel is already haunted or evil or demonic or possessed or whatever it might be, playing this elevator game could be really, really dangerous. And there's already so much evidence that something really weird is happening. The whole time I'm doing this episode, I was just thinking about the American Horror Story season that I watched about the hotel. And I was like, yeah, something weird was happening in that season. So I just kept thinking that that must be what's happening here in this hotel. But I would love to know what your guys' theories are, what your thoughts are. But until next week, my friends, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then.